So I'm sitting here with Seán Kinane from Health Matters. Seán agreed to jump on, and we're going to have a conversation and answer a couple of questions around VO2 max testing, and especially around what the data on your heart rate monitors and your apps that tells you at the end of the training session, and I suppose different physiological kind of underpinnings to what's going on in those apps and how they're relevant to you as an athlete, and especially as a coach. And the information that a coach might want to know about an athlete's fitness, conditioning, etc., as they get ready for a tournament or an event of some kind. So we've got a lot of questions in, lots from the kickboxing world and some from the kayaking world as well, believe it or not, which is great. And some just questions in from people who are looking to stay fit. So Seán is a sports performance specialist, a fitness specialist, and has been running and owning Health Matters since 2009. Seán, is that correct?
2011 I set it up in
2011.
Ireland. So I worked in Australia with the equipment in 2009.
Cool. So over to you. You fire away there and let us know who you are and how you're keeping.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Happy to be on here and help educate and kind of bring home a couple of truths. So as John said, I'm a sports performance specialist. So I've ran Health Matters since April 2011 in Ireland. I've done just under 10,000 VO2 tests. So I'm the most active tester in Europe. I don't think there's many people in the world that will have done more VO2 tests than me. So I've seen it all. I'm very passionate about what I do. I really enjoy what I do, and I work with the spectrum of that person I work with, rather than just saying athlete. I work with professional athletes, and I've even carried out VO2 testing on the effects of exercise on obese pregnant women. So a really interesting clinical trial we done in the Coombe Hospital about 6 years ago. So like VO2 isn't just necessarily for athletes, although it is really, really beneficial, and a lot of our talk will be all around the benefits of it for a professional athlete. But it isn't just for athletes. There's many benefits, and I think one of the good things, and I was talking to someone recently, and they were saying that VO2 should be really used as a health marker, even in this current epidemic. He said, I wonder how many people that scored well in a VO2 test have got coronavirus. You know, like it'd be really interesting, because VO2 is relevant to health. So VO2 is your gold standard measurement for fitness.
I got to know Seán maybe 6 or 7 years ago, just by reaching out to get one of my athletes tested in a VO2 max test. First time ever doing it, and kind of first time being introduced to the results of that test, and what it told me as a coach was enlightening, and kind of paved the way for the rest of the training program as we went on to win the European Championships that year. I don't know if you remember Lauren doing the test many years ago with you, Seán.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good place to start, isn't it? So there's lots of lots of pictures out there, lots of people with masks on their faces saying they're getting the VO2 max test. But Seán, what is it? What's it all about? What does it tell the athlete, and what does it tell the coach?
Okay, so VO2, what it means and what it stands for is volume of oxygen, and it measures how much oxygen a client or an athlete is consuming in milliliters per kilo weight of body mass averaged over a minute. So that's really important, is the relevance to body weight. So VO2 is relevant at a moment in time when you get tested. And using fighters as an example, one of the biggest ways to change your VO2 max is to decrease body weight. So if you decrease body weight, you're going to score a higher VO2. So VO2, although like some people will argue that VO2 is only a marker of potential rather than a pure indicator of performance, which is correct. However, I would rather know if my athletes are exposed to high volumes of oxygen rather than low volumes of oxygen. So you have to remember, with the human body, the higher content of oxygen you consume per kilo weight of body mass, the more efficient you're going to be. Now, we're going to get into this in a lot more detail as the conversation goes on, but what it is, it's about performing efficiently, performing aerobically, which means that you're working with the presence of oxygen. So within a VO2 test, so often people just say, sure, what's the benefit of having a VO2? It's only a number. But within a VO2 test, what you'll get is you'll get your VO2 score, which is your fitness level. You'll get your max heart rate. You'll get your recovery percentages heart rate, so 1 and 2 minute recovery. You get your 4 training zones. You'll get your threshold identification. You'll get your calorie expenditure. You'll look at fractional exchange of gas, which is how much oxygen you're using, lung capacity, lung function, breathing patterns, ventilation. Like it's endless how much detail we could really go into. So this whole idea that a VO2 test is just a measurement on lung capacity is wrong, because within a VO2 test, you're not going to describe each one of those points when you're trying to promote a service. I call it a VO2 test, but within the VO2 test, you're given endless amounts of information for an individual. And let's always use combat sport as an example. And by all means, John, we can talk about kayaking. I've tested rowers. Just from the get-go, the test is available as a run test, a row test, or a bike test. So depending on what your discipline is, we would then say, okay, well, this is where we're going to do what you're going to do your test on. If you have kind of field sports, you get them to do run tests naturally, because they're going to be running rather than cycling or rowing. Mm-hmm. If you have no experience in rowing, I would definitely not promote people to do a row test, because it's a power test realistically, and you have to increase power output, mm-hmm. which can be very difficult to do over a relatively long period of time. Traditionally, rowers are used for intervals for people that aren't into the sport. Same with the bike test. The bike test, you have to create power the whole time. And if you're not conditioned in creating power outputs through the lower limbs, you're going to fail on the test early. So your data will differ from run test, row test, and bike test. For your traditional MMA athlete or kickboxers, we would promote them to do it as a stand or as a run test. However, I'm doing a lot of work with professional MMA athletes, and if we know at the start of camp that there is an injury or an underlying condition that we know that the running aspect of the camp is not be there, we would test on a bike. So then we can program their data and their training regime based on the findings from bike testing in order for them to carry out bike fitness throughout the camp.
Mm. So what's the commonalities? I know you've probably tested hundreds of combat sports fighters from across the years and from different levels, endurance levels. But what are the commonalities across fighters who would have a high VO2 max? Like what's it looking like? So if you were to put your finger on a number of high-end athletes, what would be the commonalities across those tests?
Right, so what we're looking for realistically, now obviously it's going to vary. So VO2 at a point in a camp the data is going to vary. So we would traditionally, let's say we have an athlete that has a fight in 12 weeks. We would test them at the very start of the camp, which would get them at their lowest point. So theoretically, they've taken a bit of time off. They're not at their peak performance, and we get measurements at that point. And then we program off that. But when you're looking for, or the question, what commonalities you're going to see with a high-end MMA athlete, you're going to want a big VO2, relatively big. You're talking high 50s, early 60s. You want to have, and one of the biggest things that I need, or my whole job when I work with an athlete, is to get them efficient. So we want to make them as aerobically sound as possible. So we want their threshold to be as high as possible. Yeah. But one of the big things with an MMA athlete or a combat sport athlete is that we need the recovery to be good. So within a minute, you need to have the ability for your heart rate to reduce to change energy systems. So in terms of commonalities, three main things we look for: good VO2, good recovery, high threshold. Generally, what you're going to see when somebody comes in at the start of a camp is VO2 is okay. VO2 isn't the be all and end all for me with a combat athlete or any athlete. I'm looking more in terms of how their body's performing. The recovery isn't going to be where we want it to be, and their threshold certainly isn't going to be where it wants to be. So we're going to need to program in order for the body to adapt, allow them to become more efficient, and to get their recovery higher. Now, the reason we want their threshold to be high and the recovery to be high. So what I talk about is threshold. Threshold stands for anaerobic threshold. It's when your body changes energy systems. So aerobic, we're efficient. Anaerobic, we're inefficient. 80-90% of combat athletes are going to be anaerobic for their 3 or 5 minute round. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's an explosive sport. You're going to be using that anaerobic pathway. But I want you to come out, take a break for a minute, and walk back out aerobic. I know, and I've been told so many times by top MMA athletes that I work with, and I'll always remember I went to watch one of the lads I was working with in the National Boxing Stadium. It was a Muay Thai event, and it went to a 5-rounder. It was only scheduled for 3 rounds, but had to go 5 rounds. And he said to me after he won the title that he 4th and 5th round, he walked out from the corner looking across the opponent, and psychologically he knew he was back recovered within a minute. And he said the boost in confidence that gave him was phenomenal, because he knew he was efficient for a very short or maybe a long period of time within that round, but he knew he had the ability to recover and perform. So we want combat sport athletes to push that threshold up as much as they can. I can never guarantee you're going to be aerobic for a full round. If you are, you're going to win, unless you get knocked out. If you're
aerobic, it's a walk in the park, as they say.
Like you should be able to perform really, really well for the duration of that bout.
Yeah.
And unless you get caught or something.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's kind of a common mistake by athletes, thinking that the idea is to kind of stay anaerobic as much as possible, you know, to try stay within that threshold as much as possible, which is a fine line between fatigue and performance.
Yeah.
Seán, what do those stats look like? What would a readout look like, and how would you interpret that?
Right, so let me just pull up a file here and I will share it with you. So, share screen. Can you see that?
It says you're going to start sharing the screen, and there we go.
Right, so if we look at the left-hand side, this is, if you follow the cursor, so this VO2 score for this athlete was a 68.3. So 68.3 is a really, really high score. It's a great VO2 max. So let's look at numbers of VO2. So if you look at performance and field sport athletes, male, you're going to be scoring in the 50s, professional. You female, you'd be looking at high 40s, early 50s. Endurance athletes, you're going to be wanting high 50s, early 60s. Female, you're looking at kind of mid 50s to high 50s. And then, you know, you're dealing with some really, really high level athletes when you're pushing up towards high 60s, early 70s. The highest ever recorded in the world was a 96. That was a cross-country skier. The highest I've ever tested was an 89.8.
What sport was that, Seán?
He was a runner. He runs a 14-minute 5K. So just to put that into context, he was 6'3", very lean. He was an accountant. I told him he should have packed in his daytime job and started to run. But that's just off point. So this is what some of the data would look like. So 68.3 was his VO2 max. His max heart rate was 185. Now, me knowing this protocol off by heart, I'm just trying to work out speed. So he got to pretty much 18 minutes of the test. He was running 18 kilometers an hour on a 6% gradient at that point. So he was moving, and his heart rate was only 185. We look at some other information, his recovery. So if you look at down the bottom here, he recovered 41% in a minute, which is phenomenal. He recovered 59% in 2 minutes. What I look for in the first minute is a minimum of 12 to 15%. He recovered 41%. He's nearly three times.
That's some drop. Yeah, that's some drop.
Second minute, he's 59%. I'm looking for a 30% recovery. He's double that. You know, so this is a train. This guy's a runner, actually. I can pull up an MMA athlete. He runs a 250 marathon comfortably. He's in his 40s now, but he's a really well-conditioned athlete, and he's someone that's worked with me for years and based a lot on heart rate training. His training zones. So when you do a test, you'll be given training zones. So these would be his training zones. So you can see how conditioned he is. If we work backwards, his max heart rate's 185. His threshold, or the high end of his moderate zone, is going to be 166. So he's within 20 beats. He's very, very efficient. Again, very me understanding the numbers. He's running 15 kilometers an hour on a 4% gradient when he turns anaerobic. So he's running sub 4 minute kilometers aerobically. You know, like it's some really, really superior data. The zones, which we can cover now if you want. Do you want to go into that, what they mean?
Yeah, we had a couple of questions around, you know, how many times a week should you be training in the green zone? Why should I be training in the yellow zone, etc.? Yeah, so if it links in nicely, Seán, let's do that now.
Right, so let me just go through the data first. So you have to understand the principles of energy systems before you understand heart rate zones.
Yeah.
So if you get a heart rate monitor and don't get a test done, your data is going to be inaccurate.
Yeah.
If you get a test done and don't use your training zones, your data, your training is going to be inaccurate. So the best way to do it, and it's not just self-promoting here, like if you want to get a test done to identify thresholds with anybody, that's fine, because you're going to benefit from it. So when you get tested, you get thresholds identified. So what a threshold is, we look at it as an anaerobic threshold. It's when your body changes from an aerobic energy system to an anaerobic energy system. So aerobic, it's in the name, is when the body performs with oxygen, so air. When you perform aerobically as a human, you're efficient, you're durable, you don't break down, you don't produce a lot of byproduct, you're pretty much using oxygen the whole time. Your calorie expenditure is relatively low, so you're burning the majority of your calories from stored fat. When you turn anaerobic, and the reason you turn anaerobic is because the energy demand exceeds the oxygen deliverance. The body cannot create energy with oxygen anymore. So it starts to use glycogen, which is glucose, which is carbohydrate. So they're just different terms. They all mean the same thing. Carbohydrate broken down to glucose, stored as glycogen in the liver and in the muscles. Now, when we perform anaerobically, we're inefficient. You can't argue with that. There's no denying we're inefficient. We're inefficient because we're not using oxygen. We're using an energy supply that's going to run out. So the average human has 80,000 calories available from stored fat. The average human has 2,000 calories available from glycogen. So there's a massive difference in energy demand supply. You're going to run out of the fuel, but the big thing is you're going to create byproduct. Now that byproduct is lactic acid. Lactic acid gets a bad rap. Lactic acid isn't this evil product that causes us to break down. It's the body's reaction to lactic acid. So when the acidity of the blood gets too high, a number of things is going to happen. We're going to start to exhale more. We're going to blow off more carbon dioxide. We're going to develop oxygen debt. And that's one of the real big factors why we can't perform. Now, the body's reaction to that lactic acid accumulation or high acidity within the blood is to release hydrogen ions into the bloodstream, which is going to slow contraction and expansion of muscle down. You're more susceptible to injury, cramp, fatigue. And that driving home, or that factor that you're in oxygen debt, your body is going to force you to slow down. You have to remember as well, your heart's a muscle. And if your heart starts to be forced to slow down because of the contraction and expansion, the blood deliverance is going to slow down, which means the oxygen deliverance is going to slow down, which means you're going to turn or perform or stay anaerobic. So we can't perform anaerobically endlessly. It's just impossible to do. So this whole theory, go hard or go home, you have to keep pushing, you always need to stay in red zone. Excuse the French, it's bullshit. And it's one of the main reasons people fatigue, overtrain, get injured, don't adapt, is because this whole concept that we have to go hard. So one of my hardest jobs is to get people to slow down. And not mainly, but a lot of your MMA/combat athletes are a nightmare for it. You know, like I've sat in rooms with athletes who I won't name and coaches who I won't name, but both who are extremely famous, and trying to drive home the fact that you need to lower your intensities. So let me just pull this data back up so we can have a look at it again now that we spoke a bit more regarding the actual training zones and what they mean. Can you see that?
I do, yeah.
So if we look at the left-hand side of the screen, low zone. So this client is 63 to 141 is his low zone. So you have to remember this is this fella's zones uniquely. So he can perform up to 12 kilometers an hour, because that's 141, incline 3%, 100% aerobically, 100% calories are coming from stored fat, which is phenomenal, like super efficient. So he can do all his low intensity work, i.e. warm up, cool down, or active recovery or slow runs up to heart rate 141, which is just amazing. So this is where I would get him to do the likes of warm up, cool down, or recovery runs. His green zone, 141 to 166. This is where he is going to perform optimally for long distance. So this is his 10, 12, 15, 18 marathon paces. He is going to be in this zone. His calories are majority coming from fat. However, I'm sure people have heard of aerobic glycolysis. There will be a bit of glycogen getting used here, but still predominantly calories are coming from stored fat. So when we want someone to do a long run, we want them to do it aerobically. There is no point in doing your long run anaerobically, because that's not the objective. The objective is to do it aerobically. So not to put the body under any stress, keep the body using oxygen, work on our breathing pattern, work on how the foot lands or the strike in terms of gait, how we're going to run. And we want you to be really, really comfortable on them runs. If you go and do a long run anaerobically, your body is going to be in stress and there's no adaptation. So when we perform in our yellow and red zone, both of them would be anaerobic. So yellow would be tempo, red would be interval. So tempo, as an example, is anything longer than 60 seconds. So I program in like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes in yellow. And then red is going to be anything less than 60 seconds. So this is interval. So people talk to me about intervals. I did an 8-minute interval. You didn't do an 8-minute interval. You did an 8-minute tempo. You can't do an 8-minute interval if you're performing max.
90% plus heart rate. Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah, absolutely flat out, because each different zone has a different principle or a different training point. So your low zone is going to be recovery. One of the really big points with low zone is it increases stroke volume. Stroke volume is the content of blood that leaves the heart in one beat. If we get more blood to leave, we get more oxygen to leave. We get more oxygen delivered to the working muscles, we're more efficient.
Yeah.
So low zone is really, really important. Now, a lot of athletes will come in and their low zones won't be as high as this fella's. So they find it impossible to do, which is fine. And I understand that's fine. We do their warm up there and then I get them to do their long runs in green.
Yeah.
But they have to stay in green. Like time and time again, you're told, I can't do this, Sean. I can't keep my heart rate down. And then you ask them what pace they run. They're like, oh, I'm running sub 5 minute kilometers. I'm like, what are you running a sub 5 minute kilometer on a long run?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of mental. You have to train the mind as well to realize what you're doing. So if you're always anaerobic and you're always going yellow and red, your body will never adapt because you're always in a state of stress.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go slow to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's hard to get the head around. You'll also burn more calories from stored fat when we're in green.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying, and it's actually a bit of a buzz at the moment, fat adaptation or low steady state aerobic training, or I'm going to go and do a fasted run. But if you do a fasted run and you do it anaerobically, you're not burning fat, you're burning glycogen or glucose, which is stored from the meals that we've eaten previously.
Yeah.
So it's not going to do anything.
It's a bit of a catch-22. There was a good question came in, Seán, actually, which is linked directly to this, and it's actually a pal of mine who's just trying to get back, getting fit again, bought himself a heart rate monitor, is trying to do a bit of running. But every time he starts off, 2 or 3 minutes into the run, he's spiking into his red zone, and he can't continue. So his question was, you know, what do I do? I can't run any slower. Now, in fairness, he hasn't been trained in a long time. He's put on a bit of weight, and now he's just getting back up off the couch. So running for him at the moment is just too hard for him. So what does he need to do in order to get the best out of his training?
Right, so the first question I was asking is that a generic red zone? Is he just using a formula? Because if he's just using a formula, which is standard 220 minus your age multiplied by a certain percentage, they're very inaccurate. And I'll give you 2 really, really simple examples on this, and it answers a couple of questions that I've seen that were coming in on your story. So use me and my brother as an example. We're both from the same mother and father. Mm-hmm. Genetically, we should be theoretically the same. Mm-hmm. We have different sports. He's a competitive butterfly swimmer, unbelievable swimmer. He'll get his heart rate up about 210 when he's racing. Okay, he's older than me. So 210, he's in his 30s. So that whole theory straight away is gone. Me, on the other hand, I struggle to get my heart rate over 160. Struggle. I can't do it. Like last night, John was sent me 2 questions last night. I went and did tempo and interval sprints or hill sprints last night. My heart rate didn't get over 163, 164. And I was flat out uphills. I just couldn't do it. So if both of us were to use that 220 minus your age formula, they would be both completely wrong.
Yeah. So
make sure you're not just using that theoretical formula. That's number one, because you mightn't be red. You could be green, you could be yellow. I doubt you're in red, to be honest.
Yeah.
Secondly, unfortunately, this is something that takes time. You can't just get a quick fix. And I'm a prime example for it. I don't do a lot of running, but since lockdown has come in, I've really got into my running and I'm really enjoying it. And I cannot break the 4 minute kilometer mark. And it's frustrating me so much. Like last night, I was so annoyed about it. I'm only running about 5 weeks, you know, and I'm like, I have to practice what I preach, but I just want to break that. But now I know I need to start to integrate some intervals. I know I need to start to integrate some longer, slower runs. So every second day for the last 6 days, I've done tempos and I can't break the 4 minute kilometer. So tomorrow I'm going to do a long steady state 5K, keep my kilometers down below, or about 5 minute kilometers. 2 days later, I'll do some interval training, and then I'm going to attempt it again. So I'm looking at hitting each discipline in order to adapt. Okay. So keep coming back to your friend's question. Is he going off too hard because he has this pre-conceived idea that he should be able to do this because he's done it in the past? So he has to look at a number of different factors. He's gained a bit of weight, you said. So he's no longer as efficient as he used to be. The more weight you have, the more demand for oxygen to that body weight, the harder the heart's going to have to work. So let's look at doing it together. Let's say, okay, I'm going to start to drop a bit of weight. If I drop a bit of weight, my heart rate is going to reduce because the demand for oxygen or blood deliverance to all weight is going to reduce. Yeah. I'm going to do that. Change it up as well. Don't just do the same run all the time. So go, okay, so today is going to be extremely difficult. I'm going to go to a football field. and I'm going to run as fast as I can one length of the field. I'm going to walk the whole way back. I'm going to repeat it. So the effort's probably going to be 10 or 12 seconds. That's your interval day. Do as many as you can with good recovery. That's that day done. Next day, you're going to go for a walk/jog. So if you find your heart rate's going too high because your pace is too high, lower the intensity. And if that means you have to go at a pace that you find uncomfortable or not ashamed, but you're thinking, I can run faster than this. But if you're going into red and you cannot perform, you're running too hard, you're running too high, you're anaerobic. So we need to start to go out. Or the alternative is get a bike. Go off on a lower, like, so theoretically your heart rate's going to be lower on a bike than it is on a run because you're sitting down for starters. So your heart doesn't need to pump as high. So there's lots of different things you can do, but repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the first sign of madness. But it's also, you're not going to go anywhere because you're just doing the same thing to your body. And this is something that I see a lot, is athletes will come in and go, oh, I'm not, my times aren't getting any better, I'm not getting any fitter, but I feel a bit better. Feeling better and performing better are two different things. What you're learning to do if you're always in yellow and red is you're learning to deal with fatigue or byproduct production associated with anaerobic. You're not actually getting better. What makes you get better is adaptation, which means threshold adaptation. So mixing up all the different types of running, easy walk/jog, easy jog, uncomfortable runs, that kind of tempo stuff where you're greater than 60 seconds up to 8 or 12 minutes, and then them really uncomfortable intervals. But leaving your house with a clear plan every day as to what session you're doing. I use my front door as a marker. When I walk out, I go, okay, what's the point of this session? Is it aerobic or is it anaerobic? And when I know that, then I know exactly what I'm going to do. And even if it means the intensity of session is low, or if the intensity of session is high, you just don't repeat the same thing over and over again if it's pushing it up. But just to keep, I know it keeps going off the point, but I would make sure you're trying. I wouldn't be overly concerned about your heart rate in red if you haven't got tested. I would change up the intensities rather than just doing the same repeated effort. Maybe incorporate some bike work, but also be patient. Be patient is one of the biggest things I can say. And this is when it clicks, you'll really start to notice when you put a bit of effort in, when you're on your low, slow stuff, work on that breathing, work on that stride. And then in 4 to 6 weeks' time, you'll be running faster for less effort. That's when you know it's worked.
And that's the beauty of walking, Seán, isn't it? For people who are getting back into training, maybe you have been sedentary for a couple of years through whatever reasons. And you touched on the culture of go hard and go home. And many people are trying to get back into fitness, going to boot camps, go hard, go home culture, getting totally wrecked, burnt out, not able to go back to it because they feel that that's how you have to get fit. It's probably counterproductive in the long run. In fact, it is counterproductive in the long run. What's your opinion there?
Yeah, like one of the big things I like it. One of the ones I tend to always link this back to is a high stressful position in work, and they go and do a spin class. You know, so they come from a high stress in work, they go in, they do high stress in exercise.
They're probably high stress people, you know.
Yeah, so like the parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system never gets a rest. It's always under consistent pressure. Then they worry why they're not losing weight, or they concern why they're not losing weight. Remember, when we're spinning, we're anaerobic. Calories that come from glucose. We're going to go home and probably have a carbohydrate-containing meal. And you're under complete stress. So you need to bring in that lower intensity stuff. So one of the things I'll always do with my combat sport athletes is we would, depending on the level of professionalism, depending on the planned session, the event, where we are in the camp, this type of thing, we will vary how many green sessions we'll do a week. And it will vary for the athlete as well. So, for example, let's use your friend there. I'm probably going to throw it out there that he has a poor aerobic capacity. He is turning anaerobic really, really early. So we don't necessarily need him to be doing 4 interval sessions a week. Well, what's the benefit of that? We need him to bring in some green zone training, which is going to allow for adaptation, but will also allow him to do some yellow and red training in order to create the stimulus to grow the threshold. Let me get the threshold up on the screen here. This will make more sense.
Good visual of that would be good. So
if we look at this graph here, So this green graph, this is a great example. So if I bring this green line to here, I can't bring it back. I'll bring the blue line back first. So this is a progressional test actually. So this is where his initial data was when he would have started working with us first. I put two tests on top of each other here. Okay. And what he's done is he's moved his threshold on by performing based on heart rate zone. So he has grown his green vertical line. His threshold has gone up by it's gone up 6 minutes. It's gone up 4 kilometers. Now this is over a 12 or 16 week camp,
Sure,
this guy's a good athlete. But what we're looking to do is we're looking to push that green line on as far as we can. And how we do that is by stimulation in yellow and red, as well as allowing long, slow runs in order to adapt. If you're always yellow and red, there's no adaptation. There's just stress.
Just stress, yeah.
So he's probably pretty hard on himself. He's probably had a good background in performance, and he probably thinks he should be able to go out and do this. But he just needs to overview, be a critical evaluator, look at your own training from above. Don't look at it from a point of view, I need to go hard, hard, hard. Like for my own self, talking about practice what I preach, I know this is going to take time. I'm only running 5 weeks. Now, don't get me wrong. Look, I've a really good level of fitness, and it's probably like people are like, what, you're running 401 kilometers and you think that's bad? Yeah, it does, because I have a high level that I want to achieve. I know in the grander scheme of things, it's pretty impressive. But I have to step back and overview what stimulates me and what is green for me. Like, lucky enough, I've tested. All my training is based on heart rate. I know exactly where I am, every zone I need to be in. My intervals are dictated by recovery. Yeah, look, I have the benefit of testing anytime I want. But it's about being that critical of your own training to say, okay, I know I want to go on a hard run today, but I know I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a long, easy walk/jog. I'm going to get an extra bit of sleep today. I'm going to drink more water. I'm going to have more greens on your aerobic days, that type of stuff. And one of the things that it ties in nicely if people neglect is sleep or rest. Like, how many people get 7+ hours a night sleep, professional athletes, or people that are striving to run a sub-3 hour marathon or striving to win a medal in kickboxing championship? You look at sleep, it's probably one of the most neglected things.
Absolutely.
We adapt when we sleep, we recover when we sleep, we grow when we sleep. Like
a lecturer of mine in college actually said sleep is the training. If you're not sleeping, your training is a total waste of time. So everything takes place as you're sleeping. He actually said sleeping is the training part. So I thought it was interesting.
There's studies on weight loss coming out now about it as well. Like one of the most overlooked attributes in weight loss is sleep deprivation. Or like just not getting enough. And it's one of the things, bar working with athletes, I would do a lot of work with weight loss, and it's something that people don't credit themselves, or they don't allow for downtime. In the world that we live in, it's something like, even as I say, read a book. Don't sit on your phone up until 1 minute before you go to sleep and then tell me that you struggle to fall asleep. Like sleep hygiene is so important. Or I can't sleep. When did you last have a cup of coffee? About 2 hours before I went to bed. Well, that's going to keep you awake. Blood sugar balancing. I know we're getting off topic. Blood sugar balancing is something that causes people to wake consistently through the night, because the production of cortisol when the blood sugar gets too low, and
it wakes you up looking for a feed.
That's a whole different ball game. It's a topic in itself, but
it is.
The long, slow, steady stuff is crucial to performance, but it takes discipline to do.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of answers one of the other questions that came in from a paddler. Actually, they're starting from a low base of fitness. How do you use heart rate data with dynamic benchmarks? That kind of covers that nicely, I think, doesn't it? Just getting back into fitness training and stuff.
But track it and be proud. Like I was talking to my brother. My brother lives abroad, but I'm coaching him from home. So when he was home last time, we tested him, and then I send his data to a coach, and the coach will program for him. It's the coach I use over here, and he said he looks back at the paces that he was running when he started to run 6 or 8 months ago, and can't believe how slow he was. But he said that to me. He was giving me the advice yesterday on the phone. He said, look, you can look back on these times in 6 or 8 weeks and say, Janie, you've come on a long way, So benchmark everything, track it all. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed to go on slow runs, even if it means walks.
Yeah.
But integrate as much variability as you can. Don't just do the same thing over again.
Yeah.
Bring in hill sprints, bring in tempos, bring in kilometer efforts, bring in 5K steady state. You know, like change your training so there's always a stimulus.
Yeah.
Repeat the same thing, you'll get the same result.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a good point that you make about like your ego when you're out doing kind of that low intensity steady state. I was on the green about 2 weeks ago doing a very casual, a very light jog, and I was lapped twice by somebody who was probably in their 60s, maybe early 70s. And there's a little bit in me that says, "Come on, man, you can't let this happen. You're gonna have to speed up."
Chase him down.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one about ego and staying disciplined for your low intensity stuff.
It is, and even more so, not more so for me, because it's my job to tell people how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I should be able to do this, but I'm like, no, listen to what you say, you know. Or I was talking to a couple of the athletes I work with over the few days, and they're like, I'm so happy you're doing tempos and intervals, because they know I know the pain I put them through.
Exactly.
They're like, it's a bit of feedback for you.
Yeah. It's all good. Listen, would two people of the same age possibly have different max heart rates, and if so, why? That came in from a taekwondo fighter.
Absolutely, and this is something that I encounter quite a lot with the likes of runners or cyclists, because they train in pairs or partners or anything like that. We're all completely different, from completely different backgrounds, and we've touched on a lot of points. So did the guy that you're comparing your heart rate to have 10 hours sleep and you had 6? What's his diet consistent of? What's his genetic background? What's the history of heart problems in his family, or what's he been genetically pre-exposed to? Like, absolutely. And this is why I say to people, you cannot base your heart rate training zones off somebody that's got tested, because you will have different heart rates.
Yeah, for sure.
Do not be worried in any way, shape, or form if you have a higher or lower heart rate than someone you consider to be extremely fit or who you aspire to be like. You're completely two different people. And again, I know I'm not the exact same age as my brother, but we are genetically pre-exposed to the same genes, but we've completely different heart rates. And we'd both be healthy, but I don't know, to be honest, as to why we have different heart rates, but we do have different heart rates. Are they the same weight? Are they the same age? You know, these are the things that we need to always look at. So we know they're the same age. Are they the same weight? Are they the same height? Sleep, everything. There's so many different factors into it, but you will definitely have different heart rates without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. I think that's pretty obvious. A great question came in, and this is something that's overlooked by coaches, I think, a lot. This was sent in by a young athlete, actually, and the question was, how intense should your warm-up be?
What is the main, like? So
this would be a kickboxing, a young kickboxing athlete on a development program, probably doing a standard kickboxing class, probably working on technique, a little bit of sparring and stuff. But obviously, you know, with sparring, you're going to be spiking your heart rate up pretty consistently, probably into the 80%, 90% of max heart rate. But it's an interesting one. I suppose it's interesting from the point of view as to how coaches actually structure their classes or their sessions. Are they too hard? Can they be too hard at the start?
I think we'll be able to tie in together with this nicely. You'd have the experience as a coach on this, but I'm looking at it from a principle perspective. So what is the objective of a warm-up? So it's in the name. It's to warm you up. It's to get you fluid. It's to get you mobile. It's to get your joints active. It's to get your muscles warmed up. Again, using an example of running, I will do 10 minutes of dynamic stretching before I leave the house. You know, so movement of my hips, movement hamstrings, quads, glutes, everything like that, going through the theory. So my own background would be Muay Thai in terms of my own sport. So if I was to do Muay Thai, I'd do upper body, lower body, shadow boxing, you know, like going through the motions of what your session is going to be. Now, you're never going to replicate what your session is going to be if you're sparring, but you want to make sure that you're warmed up, you're stretched, your muscles are ready. Do you have to go into your red zone? No. But like, I've been in sessions where people are getting you to do 20-meter max sprints. You know, like, is there a need for that? Are you going to pull a hamstring? What's the premises you're in? Have you done your dynamic stretching? Have you done your shadow boxing? You probably would lean on this a bit better, John, in terms of your knowledge. But I would just look at what's the principles of a warm-up. And if you know yourself that you've done your stretching, your mobility work, you feel like you're moving around, maybe a light sweat is starting to go on, and then your coach is going to push you through whatever you might consider too hard. You're ready for that. The warm up is probably part of your session more so at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. I think from my point of view, very quickly, I think the less experienced the coach is, the harder the warm up session is. I think sometimes a lot of the warm ups and even the class itself, if there's a lack of technical knowledge, that gap is kind of filled with really intense exercise for no apparent reason than just it's really easy to tell someone to do something as hard and as fast as they possibly can.
A burpee.
Yeah, keep going until I say stop. Oh, my coach is so hard, you know, he's so great. Like, it's 10 minutes of burpees, you know, and it's all nonsense. But I think it boils back to that culture of go hard or go home. If the warm up isn't tough, well then it's not a training session. This type of mindset, which is really ridiculous. It's crap. I remember in my early days when I was competing, traveling out to another club to a very well-established coach just to get some spars off their fighters, and did a warm-up session that incorporated the sprints the full length of the hall, nearly from the get-go, to a point that I was actually feeling sick and I had to go out to the toilet to try and get sick before the session even started. And the result of that is I remember that part of the class really well because it was awful. And I forget the rest of it. The rest of it was just a blur. I think I might have just tried to survive for the rest of that class. And I think, Seán, you're right. Your warm-up is exactly that. It's to prime you for the main body of the session. It's to get blood into the muscles, to get oxygen into the blood, to get your head kind of leveled off and ready for the training session. And most importantly, to interact with your peers in the class, socialise and see how everyone's getting on, you know. So hopefully that answers that question for that young lad. An aspiring kickboxer, you might see him on the world stage sooner.
I think what we need to obviously say to him, John, as well, is we don't want him to go up to his coach and say you're doing this wrong.
No.
But if it means you need to get there 5 or 10 minutes earlier and you need to go through your own warm-up or your dynamic stretching or your mobility work and catch up with your friends, that's fine. And then if you can only do what your coach is doing. If you're only a young aspiring kickboxer, you're obviously going to follow his lead. But I
think he's all right. His coach is his brother, so he can say what he likes to him.
Okay, yeah,
I think anyway.
yeah, that's all right then.
How important are green zone sessions? How many should you be doing a week? I think we touched on that earlier. That's from an MMA athlete.
Yeah, but just to come back to it, they're absolutely vital. Vital. I cannot stress enough the importance of green zone.
Now, I hope she's listening, because every time she posts up on Instagram and she trains hard, she trains too hard. Everything is balls to the wall. Everything is sprints. Everything is plyometrics. Everything is throwing things around at the hardest that she can go. So it's a great question, and I hope she's listening in. I'm sure she will be. They're very, very important.
Female athletes as well, really important, really, really important. And again, a couple of your well known fighters I've worked with, and recently enough, I sat down with her and her coach, who are both really well known, due to the loss of her cycle, and trying to drive home that she's training 3 times a day, and they're all yellow or red zone, and she can't understand why she's getting injured and why her cycle is so messed up and everything like that. And it's just dangerous, you know, the level of intensity that they cause, that they put on their body, especially as a young female. You need to be really, really aware of it, that you allow for and listen to your body. Don't put yourself under so much stress all the time, you know. Let them green zones come in, and don't be so hard on yourself if it means that you have to miss a session and go for a walk that day. Get a bit more sleep and just be aware.
No adaptation. If you're constantly under stress, there's no improvement. It's all regressive. Another question in from a young athlete. She says, if you're a fit athlete, what should your heart rate be right after an intense or a normal spar? So it kind of depends, doesn't it, Seán?
Yeah, like there's nothing it shouldn't be anything. It should be recovering. That's what it should be. It should be dropping.
Yeah.
So it depends on what it's spiked to. Like if I said to you it should be at the 140s and your max heart rate's 208, you're never going to do that, you know. So it's individualized. What it should be dropping. And I know that's not the answer that you probably want to hear, but you know, after an intense spar, if it's been a really high level spar, you're under pressure, you're giving as much as you're getting, there's going to be adrenaline, heart rate's going to be up. We just want to make sure post spar that you are recovering, that the heart rate is decreasing at a reasonable level, you know, that it's dropping off. And depending on, are you stagnant, are you moving, are your hands up, are your hands down, are you breathing? like, what are you doing? And then look at how the heart rate, but hopefully it's decreased. It shouldn't necessarily be anything unless I knew what your numbers were.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the key points I took away from you when Lauren did testing with you 5 or 6 years ago when we went San Sebastian to the European Championships. We knew that her heart rate would drop significantly on the 1 minute break. And that was something that we never really factored in at the time, probably never really fully understood, but took away from that session with you that she actually has the capacity to go balls to the walls for 3 rounds here, and did so. And was actually one of those championships that she went through the competitors like a hot knife through butter, just through pure intensity, knowing that she would, after the minute break at the round, will be ready to go again.
Yeah, it's a massive psychological boost for an athlete, and bringing it back to that Muay Thai fighters. But if you know that you can, so if you've done your training right, you've done your tempo sessions where you've put yourself under pressure for 3 or 5 minute rounds, you're used to dealing with that anaerobic byproduct, and you know you're going to recover within a minute, you can go balls to the wall for each round.
Yeah, 100%. I remember saying to her on the last round, going back in, I said, you're probably at about 130 now. I said, just go at her. You know, and she went, oh yeah, and went at her, you know, and won that championship pretty easy. So, no, it's a really interesting one. This is a really good question, Seán. My heart rate tells me I'm doing things well, but how do you know if you're doing things wrong? Like, can your readouts tell you you've got health problems? That's a really thought out question.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, like, my phone and my watch tell me I'm doing great. It's it's what is the word I'm looking for? It's to give you confidence. It's to give you a push. You know, well done, keep going. And you're doing great. Yeah, that's good. You know, I mean, I know it helps me saying, look, keep up the great work. You're nearly there. Whatever you set your target. Can it tell you that something's wrong? I don't think an app is going to tell you something's wrong. However, I do think if you can read your data and it's consistent, let's pull up this as an example again. I know it's not going to be the exactly same as what you have, but let's look at the client's blue line on this graph. So his blue line is his heart rate.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that spike there. Just that, is that the time across the bottom?
So what that spike is, at 4 minutes, he went from walk to jog.
Okay, yeah.
So he jogged up. So let's just say you're looking at your data and you can track your heart rate. And let's just use these numbers as an example. You're running a 5 minute kilometer, so your average heart rate's 141, and you're running. And then there's a minute where there's a couple of spikes where it's at 160 or 170, and then it's back down.
Yeah.
You know, like, something's wrong. So your phone or your watch isn't necessarily going to tell you that something's wrong with your heart, but looking at your data posts should give you an indication if your heart rate's performing well. Or using your recovery. If your heart rate doesn't recover after exercise, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, so learning.
What's that the signs of, Seán? What's that the general signs of, if you think, like, and how long? Like, if my heart rate is still at, say,
it could be a blockage of some description, you know what I mean? There could be some. Yeah. Again, it depends on what you peaked at. You know, so let's just use 170 as an example. You peaked at 170 and 2 minutes later it's still at 170, there's an issue. You know, like, you want to be down a minimum of 10 to 12% within a minute.
Yeah, easily.
And then it continues to drop. Now, in testing, I don't know, you've probably seen it, John. I got a lovely text not too long ago off a girl who basically credited me for saving her life. She'd done a test with me, and like that, them spikes were more regular than often, and I just wasn't happy. So I stopped the test, changed the monitor, changed the pickup, and I just wasn't happy. And she was really clued in about it. She's like, look, that's no problem. And in the past, I've had people go absolutely crazy at me for stopping the test. I had a girl before who demanded a refund, and I gave her a refund. And it turned out that she got a heart operation within 24 hours because her husband had pushed her to get an exam done. She got into the cardiology department in a hospital, and let's say they were open until 6 o'clock. They said she got in there 10 to 6. They said, you're going nowhere. You're getting treated in the morning. Wow. So she had a 3-way blockage in her heart. So the girl, what it was there was a lot of irregularity. And she went to her GP, and her GP told her it was dehydration. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And then she went to the cardiologist, and he got her to do various different things. And he said, no, look, it looks okay. But her brother was involved in some form of cardiology, and he got her one of these testing units where she can do an ECG when she's out running.
Yeah.
And she'd done an ECG every 15 minutes on a long run, and they figured out that there was some afibrillation blockage in her heart, and she has to just get a very simple procedure done. It should be no issue, and she can go back running, But she said, like, the likes of that, it's a regularity is what's important rather than what number it gets to or whatever. Looking for irregularities in a consistent heart rate. If it's dropping and spiking, that's an issue,
So consistent rise and consistent fall is pretty normal to look out for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Another one about recovery, Seán. How can I measure my recovery after, say, I do 2 minutes of high intensity interval training? So 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off for a round. I do hit 196 BPM. What should I be after a minute's rest?
So if we think, what's that? 196. So if we, like, let's just roughly example, we want them to be down 12%. So even if they were down 10%, they're going to be down in the 170s, 12% even, like, into the 160. You're looking for about a 12, minimum of 12. What's their background?
Taekwondo.
Yeah, you'd be looking for a 15% plus then, So let me just do that real quickly. Like but they don't do they have a heart rate monitor?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know what type now. I don't know what type.
So 29 beats off that 196 minus 29. So you're looking to be into the 160s realistically, within a minute. But are they taking, so the way they did 30 on, 15 off, are they doing 13 on, 15 off, 3 rounds and then testing recovery?
I presume so. I presume the test is in between rounds. So you do 30 on, 15 off, and then there's a minute rest to replicate the minute break in between rounds. So it might be that.
Yeah, we're looking to get them down into the 160s, realistically. Anything more than that's a bonus. Anything higher than that, don't be overly worried or concerned about. Like high 160s, early 170s, I'd be happy with it.
Cool. Question about the bleed test. The old school bleed test was done in school for the GAA team, but we never used heart rate monitors. Is that a bad thing? So I suppose you're kind of comparing bleed tests or multi-stage fitness tests, I presume, is what they were doing against heart rate monitors or testing with heart rate monitors.
They're not really comparable, really. No. Like a bleed test it's not monitored on heart rate. It's a fitness
distance,
test. It works a lot more for field sports. They find it more difficult to do individual VO2 testing, which I can understand. You panel of 20 or 30 players, so the likes of your shuttle runs, your bleed tests and stuff. I actually have a friend of mine who's putting a thesis forward regarding the comparability of bleed tests to VO2. So we tested I tested a lot of people from VO2 and then he did a bleed test with them all.
How did it turn out? Did he get results yet?
Hasn't finished it yet. He's only in the process of finishing it up. So really interesting to see.
It will be interesting. Yeah. Really interesting.
So to answer the question, is it a good thing or a bad thing? No, it's neither. They're just not the same,
Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay, as a coach, maybe I don't know if this is towards me. As a coach, Jon, what do the results of a VO2 test tell you? How do you know what to do with your guys, and how does it benefit them in the long run? I think we covered that pretty well. Going to start doing more of this when we're back at it, and I would absolutely encourage all athletes and all coaches to get involved and get tested, because without knowing the actual stats and the data, you're effectively training in the dark. You don't know if you're overtraining, undertraining, how are you meant to reach a goal if you don't know what your baseline is, where you're starting from. So it tells you everything, to be honest. Seán, what do you think?
Yeah, like it gives the inside information. As you said, you're training in the dark, you're training blind without it.
Yeah.
I think slowly but surely, breaking down a combat athlete or an MMA athlete, the attribute of fitness is becoming more and more prevalent. And this will give us the inside track on a lot of things: lung function, breathing, heart rate, recovery, ability. We use a lot of the data for weight cutting as well. I don't think we've done as much with yourself, Jon, but one of the things that it will give us, again, I'll share the screen. If we look at the lower numbers here on the heart rate zone, so we can tell you exactly how many calories you're expelling based on heart rate.
Yep.
So in order for the human body to burn a single calorie, you must consume 0.8 of a milliliter of oxygen. So the higher the VO2, the higher calorie expenditure. Mm-hmm. So if we know how much calories you're expelling, and then you know what an average heart rate is, we can then actively work out what requirements are for the likes of your weight cuts. So it'll give us a bit more inside information. But it just gives you the inside track on your athlete, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, it's if you're going to buy a car, you'll bring a mechanic with you. And what does the mechanic do? They lift the bonnet and they look inside to see exactly how the car is performing. And it's the same. It's the same analogy that you'd want to use with an athlete. You want to know exactly how they're performing and what their ability to perform is, as well, I suppose. Earlier on, Seán, you spoke about VO2 being a potential kind of predictor of performance, and that anaerobic threshold being like the predictor of performance. Can you explain that a little bit more, maybe, for us?
So VO2 as a number is it's a number basically.
Yeah. So say I get a score of, like, I'm super fit, I'm going to the World Championships, I've been training for 2 years for this big event, and I've scored with you 65 on a VO2 max test. What does that say in terms of my potential? And does that mean that I'm going to be fitter than everybody else that's there?
Let's use a second example. So you score a 65, I score a 58.
Yeah.
But I have a higher threshold than you do, and I have a better recovery than you do.
So you're going to burn me every time, yeah.
Which means I'm going to be able to perform at a higher intensity than you are. However, if we get your numbers and we start to train you smarter, you have potential to grow and perform better than I would.
Yeah. So
remember, aerobic capacity anaerobic. We turn anaerobic because we're in oxygen debt, or we can't deliver oxygen quick enough. So if we have a higher volume of oxygen, it means we have a higher availability of oxygen, which is going to keep us aerobic, which means efficient, for longer. So if we have a higher VO2 max, we have the potential to perform at a higher level. However, if we're neglecting the likes of our green zone work or not doing intervals or tempos, that type of stuff, we mightn't be able to do it. So it's not always that VO2 number that wins. There's lots of different contributing factors. However, a lot of the time, if you have a high VO2, you're going to be performing very, very well. And just off screen, before we came on here, before the recording, we were speaking about the health benefits of a VO2 max, and we were talking about how many people have died from the COVID-19 that would have a high VO2 max. And one of the relevant points in that as well, John, that I never spoke to you about is weight. So look at if someone has obesity or weight issues, their VO2 is going to be really, really low because it's volume of oxygen per kilo weight of body mass. So one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself to improve your VO2 max is to drop a bit of weight. And that's for more so not your athletes that are performing day in, day out. Like you spoke about your friend there who's coming back on, may put on a bit of timber over the time that he's taken off. Dropping weight will make you more efficient. Will make you run faster for longer for less effort. Yeah. And that's the point on it. So VO2 is a marker of potential. However, untrained, it's not really going to do a lot for you. Like, I've seen both scales of it. I've seen really high VO2 max where they perform really low. And I've seen low VO2 maxes. Like, when I say low, they're still scoring well, but like, say high 40s, early 50s, but they're running sub 3-hour marathons. Yeah. Because they're super disciplined in their training, like super disciplined. They understand recovery, sleep. They understand what needs to happen. They don't overdo it. They don't, it's something that you need to be aware of.
And obviously, endurance athletes will use their heart rate markers that are in and around or just below their anaerobic threshold as race pace, or to set a pace for a long distance, so that they know they can hold that pace without getting fatigued.
Yeah, so look at the marathon as an example. It's a prime thing to talk about. Like, people giving out. So you get someone in and they want to run a 3:30 marathon. So 26 miles, 42 kilometers, 3:30. That means you have to run a 5-minute kilometer. So then they speak to you about they're going out running 4:30s and understand why they can't break the 3:30 mark by the 42 kilometers. Because you're running too fast at the start, which means you're anaerobic. Yeah. So you have to discipline. If you want to run a 3:30, you need to consistently run 5-minute kilometers for 42 kilometers. Yeah. It's not running 4:30s at the start and then you're not going to do it. So if you look at halfway on a marathon, even 12 miles into a marathon, you're 11, 12 miles in. You look at the amount of people that start to crumble because they go off too early and they turn anaerobic. So all the negatives start to happen.
Yeah, there's an amount of intelligence really when you're running long distance or even cycling long distance, which brings me to another question around cycling and the power to weight ratio. Seán, do you want to tell us a little about how that's, I suppose, understanding power to weight ratio and how it's beneficial for cyclists?
Okay, so when we do We do VO2 testing on a bike. We do it on a watt meter, or we use a Le Mans powertrain or whatever. We have to measure wattage. So what we do is when we do VO2 testing as a run test, we'll give your heart rate zones and speed. But when we do it on a bike test, we'll do your heart rate zones and on power. So a prime example is, let's just say on January 1st, you turn anaerobic and you're producing 200 watts. And your body weight is, let's just use some simple numbers, even though it's not realistic, 50 kilos. So your FTP, functional threshold power, is done in watts per kilo. So you're generating 4 watts per kilo weight of body mass when you turn anaerobic. If you drop a bit of weight, you're going to produce more power. So FTP relevance, you drop a bit of weight, you're going to produce more power output, which means you're going to go faster. So one of the things I see, and you probably don't see it a lot, John, but I see it as a tester, as a cyclist. A lot of cyclists or triathletes, as an example, will be carrying a bit of weight, but they come in and speak to you about their new 1200 milligram wheels and their new carbon fiber frame. And I'm looking at them going, you've at least 2 stone to lose here, pal. You know, like, think about what that's going to do for your power to weight ratio. You're going to be carrying less weight, which means you're going to perform faster. Your VO2 is going to go higher, which means you're going to have more oxygen availability, which means your threshold is going to grow higher, which means you're going to be able to go faster for longer. So FTP, or watts per kilo, is about how much power you can generate and hold for a period of time. So if you drop a bit of weight and create a bit of power, or use strength and conditioning to get your power up. So use that as an example. You're producing heart rate 160, your threshold, you're producing 200 watts. You do a 12-week S&C program and a heart rate 160, you're producing 235 watts. So you're going faster for less effort. And that's what it boils down to, you know.
Makes sense. So there's no need to start shaving pieces off your wheels, or
drop a bit of weight. Like, I knew it. I did a bit of work with a guy a couple of years ago, and this isn't a word of a lie. He came to me at 110 kilos to do an Ironman, and he finished the Ironman at 110 kilos. And like, how do you train for an Ironman, not lose weight? Because your diet is atrocious. You know, you're having. This fella was having 4 sachets of Tailwind in an hour, which had 50 grams of sugar in every single one of them, you know. Or they go on the long spin, and it turned out, I do a bit of work with him since, and he's down a lot of weight. It turned out that whatever his watch told him he burned in calories, he thought he needed to eat back in. So he got rid of like 2,000 calories on a cycle. He's like, oh, well, I need to eat that now. And I'm like,
well, what's the point?
Like, you're trying to create a deficit, and you're putting all the calories back into your body. You know, like, it's beggars belief. Obviously it's my job to understand it a lot more than other people, but some of the things I'm presented with, like that example of output, like if you're using exercise as a deficit creator, you don't bring the calories back on that you've just burned, or there's no deficit. If you find that exercise is taking its toll on you from an energy perspective, what I would recommend is, so let's use some simple numbers. If you get rid of 1,200 calories an hour, take a third of them back on. So bring 400 calories on. And that means your tank is still going to be full. So use a car or a bank as an example. If you constantly output and put nothing back in, you're going to run out. If you constantly output and put the exact same back in, your balance will stay the same. So your weight will stay the same. But if you keep more out than less in, you'll be tipping down, you know what I mean? But you're going to keep it fueled as well. And
it can be hard to track calories. I mean, along with heart rate monitors, apps, and all these gizmos that are very common now that people are using, there's a great, you put me onto this one, Seán. What's the name of the app for tracking the calories? MyFitnessPal. Yeah. Really useful app, actually. And when I started using it first, when I was out with you, when I thought, actually, do you know what, I'm probably not eating enough. It's really interesting how much calories you're actually eating during the day without realizing what you're eating. It's really interesting tracking. Very much so. Very, very much so.
Like this whole thing, and again, it's probably going off topic, but I think it's important to say, like, you physically cannot drop weight unless you're in a calorie deficit. And if you're not dropping weight, you're not in a calorie deficit. You know, and I'm only eating 600 calories, you're not losing weight. You're not. You're underestimating it. 100%. One of the cracking ones I had recently enough this year, it was, came in adamant, absolutely adamant that she was only eating 1,000 calories. So much so that she was getting angry with me, you know. And then just a bit of probing, it turned out she was having 4 bulletproof coffees a day, which had 250 calories from coconut oil in them, which is 1,000 calories through coconut oil that she wasn't including. You know,
okay, yeah.
Calories are in everything. How we cook our food, oils, sauces, butters. So liquid calories are overlooked because they don't make us full.
Yep. 100%.
Or we grossly underestimate. No, that's 30 grams of oats. No, it's not. 60.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
No, that's 30 grams of pasta. No way is it. Unless, and one of the big things people say to me is, it's just too hard to track calories. I'm very black and white in this. If you want to lose weight, you have to put a bit of effort in. And if it means getting in MyFitnessPal and weighing your food for a week or two, to understand exactly what you're having, that's what it's going to take. You know?
Absolutely right, yeah, no, it's good advice. Seán, there's one more question. It's an interesting one. Does your heart rate spike when you get hit? So this is from a kickboxing athlete, female kickboxing athlete. Does your heart rate spike when you get hit? I don't know the answer to that. My spidey senses says, yeah, probably, depending on how hard you get hit.
I would say definitely. I've never tested it, and I should, because when I monitor my athletes, I sit out external. I sit out of the octagon or out of the ring when they have a monitor on, and I look at their data. I would imagine just solely based on adrenaline.
Yeah.
You know?
I would have thought so. It's a shock to the system, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, where did you get hit? Did you get punched in the nose, or did you get a body shot? Did you get kicked? I would definitely say, but I would question, why is the question there? Is she concerned that there's too many spikes in her heart rate tracking?
Don't know. I can find out. Yeah, I can go back to her and ask. Yeah.
If it's just a general question, I would say, to be honest. But
maybe after, I don't know, maybe she feels after getting hit, she feels, I don't know, tired after it or something. Maybe she's linking it that way together. I don't know.
I remember when we're sparring, we're going to be anaerobic, without a shadow of a doubt. So it depends on how far into the spar and things like
exactly.
that.
And if we're not used to controlling our breath, inhale and exhale, there's a chance you could be holding your breath while you're taking a couple of shots, which is not going to help either.
No, absolutely not. Let that byproduct out. So don't hold the breath. You know, so a lot of people do hold their breath. But remember, when we exhale, we get rid of that byproduct. So
So I'm not going to keep you too much longer. You've been really good, but I want to tap into something. You've recently qualified as a nutritional therapist. Congrats! 4 years hard. 4 years hard slog.
It's gone pretty quick. You know, it's believe it or not, like my son is 4.5, and only last night we were talking about it, and I was like, I started college when he was a baby, you know, which I don't remember. I have a 2-year-old daughter as well, and it's just it's been on Friday the 1st, so just Friday gone I graduated online basically.
Congrats. Well, it would be remiss of me to let you go without a nutritional question. So we're talking about training and heart rates, and 90% of the questions came in from combat sport athletes. Prepping for a high intensity training session, prepping nutritional strategies for high intensity training sessions. What advice would you give to combat sport athletes?
Right, so we have to remember here, high intensity sessions 100% are going to be reliant on glucose, which is carbohydrate. So you have to make sure that you have had a carbohydrate containing meal that day. So depending on what time your training session is at, depending on how digestively well you function, this is a lot of the questions are going to be put back a lot to the athletes as to how they function. Like, I know personally for me, I could have a meal 2 hours prior. Like last night before I went and did hill sprints, I had a meal 2 hours prior beforehand, and I was fine. You know, like there was no fun. I had a rice kind of containing. It was like a homemade curry with chicken, potatoes, veg, bit of rice. And when I was eating it, I was like, I'm going to be running sprints in the next 2 hours. But I knew I was fine. You know, digestively, I was fine. I know people that need 4 hours, you know, that they need to be aware of it. But you have to, I had an athlete recently, I know I keep talking recently, I haven't worked in 6 weeks, but this year we'd done a VO2 test at the start of the year, and then he went ketogenic and came back and did another VO2 test, and his performance was so poor. So when you're performing at high intensities, your supply of energy is glucose. However, you don't necessarily need to overdo it. You don't need to have 3 bowls of rice and a load of bread, and just look at what works for you. You know, make sure the meal contains your food groups: protein, carbohydrate, and fats. So we don't want to just have a carbohydrate containing meal that causes a blood sugar spike, and by the time you get to training, you've had a crash in blood sugar, which is going to promote cortisol, which is going to be a stress hormone. So look at balancing it. If we have a carbohydrate containing meal with protein and fats, it will slow the absorption rate down. We'll get a higher satiation factor. So good carbohydrates, look at kind of brown rice, brown pasta, brown breads. Like carbohydrates aren't bad. Carbs get such a bad rap. Like
They do.
We need to function with carbohydrates.
But Seán, I've heard this lots of times. I have to cut weight, Seán, and carbohydrates make me fat. So I have to go ketogenic to be a performance athlete. Oh.
And then they understand, and then they don't understand why they can't perform on their sparring.
Yeah, I've sat at ringside I've coached people who've gone ketogenic. Their nutritionist said this is the best way to lose weight for your fight, and they're gone. They're on the chair, Seán, in between rounds, and they're white. I don't feel right. I think I might have ate too much this morning. All these excuses, you know, and it boils down to the fact that the ketogenic diet has no positive benefits at all to high performance, like to athletes who are going to perform within those high intensity zones.
But it can't. Like when you break what it is down, it can't. It possibly, like there's no way it can, because your body relies on a glycolytic pathway to supply energy. Yeah. And if you're not consuming glycogen and carbohydrate, you're not going to be able to do it. No. So to go back to the question, like there's no right or wrong meal to have. Realistically, like a pre-training meal I love is rice and beans. You know, like absolutely optimal health in terms of all your bank of amino acids is done, which is your proteins. Brown rice mixed with beans, slow absorption through satiation in the protein in the beans. It doesn't have, like, baked beans are fine. There's nothing wrong with baked beans, but like if you're getting baked beans, could you throw in a mixture of beans, some kidney beans, some Kinane beans, you know, some chickpeas? You know, it's a super pre or post meal, you know. But it's about working out what works for that athlete. Do you want to have a carbohydrated drink with you when you're training? It's not a problem, but I wouldn't be overly telling you to whack it into you. Now, where you obviously train, you can't do the likes of carb rinsing or carb washing unless there's a sink close by. So just a brief, I'm a big fan of carb rinsing and carb washing. So for anyone that doesn't know it, it's when you get a carbohydrated drink and swish it around your mouth and spit it back out. So the enzyme that's needed to break down carbohydrates called salivary amylase, and that's produced in the mouth. So it will give your brain a signal that you've consumed carbohydrate when you haven't, and it will give you a temporary boost in performance for a short period of time. You see tennis players do it a lot.
We do a lot in combat sports because we've got the bucket ringside.
Perfect. Absolutely. There's some great studies on it. However, what's really important with carb rinsing and carb washing is that the athlete has consumed carbohydrate on the day or the day before. Because if you don't have the glycogen storage to dig deep into, your body can't, like, although it's a trick, it still needs to have, make sure that you've consumed carbohydrate. What would it be Lucozade or flat Coke?
Lucozade, normally Lucozade, the flat Lucozade, the isotonic Lucozade, you can get the €2 bottles.
Sure, look, when you break it down, it was originally developed for diabetics, so it is already glucose. You know, that's what it is. It's ready to go into your bloodstream straight away. So, carb rinsing. And
it's readily available. It's readily available too, which is always handy.
And I think psychologically it does a lot more than what it actually does. Like, if you're going in for a spar or something like, and you've been eating well and you're eating your main meals, you're having your fruit and veg, and like, you're not going to run out of energy because you're going to have it stored. You're 500 grams available, you know, like you're not going to go through 2,000 calories of carbohydrate in a sparring session, unless the sparring session is going for an hour and a half or two.
It's a good point. Last one, Seán. Where did the whole myth around carbs making you fat come from? Why do people say, don't eat carbs? What's that all about? Carbs are the devil. It used to be fat. It used to be fat back in the day. Don't eat fat. Where did it switch over to carbs? How did that all happen?
I think there's a couple of points on carbs. For every gram of carbohydrate you eat, or every gram of carbohydrate you store, you do store 4 grams of water.
Yeah.
And that's without it. That's fact. That's science. Okay. So when we reduce carbohydrate consumption, we reduce water retention, and we will naturally drop weight. So a couple of days into a low carbohydrate diet, you think, Jesus, this is great. My weight's down massively.
Yeah.
Now, maybe this isn't answering why they got the bad rap. Why I think it gets a good rap is because when we consume carbohydrate, we tend to consume high quantities of poor quality with an oil or and sauce. So nobody eats pasta on its own. Okay, you don't eat bread on its own. You don't eat rice on its own. You eat pasta with a creamy or oily sauce.
Yeah,
that tends to come with garlic bread or a jarred sauce, or we eat rice that comes with a jarred sauce. So what we're doing is we're consuming a lower quality product mixed with a high calorie containing product to give the flavor and the taste, and we overconsume it. So it comes down to calories. So I know this, you know this, but people just automatically assume, and I can understand. I've had people that go, I can't lose weight, and I go, right, let's go low carb. And it doesn't mean I've gone low carb just to trigger weight loss. I've gone low carb because I know it's going to mean low calorie.
Yeah.
So if you go low carb, you're going to have a higher quality product come into your body, i.e. clean sources of protein, good clean source of fat. So the quality of your food consumption greatly improves. You get more veg, you get more fruit, you get more lean source of protein. So carbs get a bad rap because carbs tend to be highly processed, highly palatable food that we consume extremely high quantities of.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, it's good advice. Seán, any athletes out there that are listening to us having a ramble, if they wanted to get serious about their training and they wanted to get tested, how can they go about it?
Right, so obviously due to the situation that we're in, testing isn't happening at the moment. However, we will be back. There's no doubt about that. We'll be back, and I can see already with the amount of emails coming in that I'm going to be busy, but we will definitely be back. There's no doubt about that. When we'll be back, I don't know. I'm like the rest of you. I'm hoping as much as early as I can. I don't think it's going to happen before July. Like August 10th is when they say it's going to be, but look, let's aim at that. My facility's up in West Park Fitness in Tallaght. We do day, evening and weekend appointments. It's a matter of just giving me a call. So I'm available on myhealthmatters.ie. My number's on that. That's myhealthmatters.ie. We're on Facebook at Health Matters Ireland. We're on Instagram at Health Matters 6411 and Twitter at Health Matters with 1T. Unfortunately, all my handles aren't the same because they were set up at different times. But I'm sure you can put some notes or a link to the platforms if you're going to be promoting this on social media. But look, if you didn't get any of them handles and you just want to get John, get my number, look, at the end of the day, if you send me an email, I'm going to ask you for your number. So just ring me anytime, send me a text anytime. And I do day, evening and weekend appointments. So availability wise, I'm quite flexible as long as you can get in. There's a bit of criteria. 2 hours before your test, there's no food, tea, coffee, or any stimulants, and no exercise on the day. You can train the day before, but we would ask you to take it relatively easy. Consultation time is approximately an hour. Yeah.
Sounds
You're
good.
not going to be running for an hour.
No. Half an hour maybe? Half an hour, 40 minutes tops?
The max is going to be is 24 minutes. But you're looking at between a 15-20 minute test. But you'll know you're worked at that point.
Absolutely. Seán, thanks for your time. It's always a pleasure to chat and always very educational.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoy it.
Appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. I'm going to get this, hopefully I can get this up on social media sometime later on this evening, or first thing tomorrow morning seems to be the best time to get stuff kind of tracking. So Seán, thanks a million. We'll stay in touch soon. Okay, cheers pal. Thanks a million. Take care. Bye.